All right, welcome back to the For Real Though show. I am your host, Christopher. Hey, well, first of all, I want to say thank you for joining me and for taking the time to listen or view, whichever one you're doing right now. Today, we're going to talk about a little bit about COVID and sports. Okay, COVID and sports. We're actually recording this on June 19th. So happy Juneteenth to everyone. I hope you had a good one. And also happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there taking care of their business. Appreciate you. All right. Those of you who know me well know that I officiate several different sports, and baseball is one of them. And this happens to be baseball season. Baseball in Ohio probably started about 3 weeks ago. And obviously there's a lot of questions on, getting out there and interacting with people. Obviously the question is, how do you play those sports, and socially distance, if you will, which I'm going to start calling physical distance, because social distance that's a whole nother story to me. It's like we need each other socially, right? So I don't think we should socially distance as much as we should physically distance, okay? Because we can still be social and not be in each other's faces. But I digress, as I do. Anyway, so getting back to baseball, there were some things that came up, and one of them is, how do you safely officiate or umpire a baseball game, especially because if you're a plate umpire, then you're behind the pitcher. I'm sorry, behind the catcher, calling balls and strikes. So one of my assigners decided that the way we would go about doing games that he assigns us is that we would have the choice that if we wanted to, we can, instead of getting behind the catcher, we can get behind the pitcher, okay, and stand 6 feet away from that pitcher and then call your balls and strikes from his vantage point, okay, which sounds pretty reasonable. But I have another assigner who I talked to, wanted to give me some games, and he told me that he was part of the state of Ohio task force with the governor's office in terms of getting things implemented and what the safety features would be. So on one hand, he expressed that he was disappointed in how, the initial weekend of opening, how a lot of people were, at restaurants crowded around each other, no mask, just in each other's faces. And on the other hand, he said that with their leagues or whatever that he's dealing with, they're not going to do any of they want to do everything standard, meaning that a plate umpire will stand over the catcher, call those balls and strikes. Now, that uh, didn't seem to make sense to me, and that's like going to be a running theme in this podcast today. A lot of things are happening that just don't make sense. So if you're going to fuss about people being in each other's faces at a bar or a restaurant, then why would it be safe for me to line up over a catcher, okay, and then each team has at least 9 players each on the field, so that's 18 that's going to be coming up to the plate over and over again. If they have a DH or EH, then you just add 2 more, so that's now 20, okay, and if they're batting the roster, then whoever's on the team can bat. So now you're talking maybe 20, 23, 24 players, okay, that are constantly coming up there, and none of us are 6 feet apart. So it just didn't make sense to me. So he's was kind of talking out of both sides of his mouth, if you ask me, because he's like, oh, we're 4 feet ahead. After all, most of the cases are people who are in nursing homes, and most of the deaths, this, that, and the other. Well, as a person with pre-existing conditions, and even if I didn't have them, I wouldn't be inclined right now to be standing over a catcher or batters or anything like that. Another thing that I noticed is, so far I've done 5 games so far. Okay, none of them, obviously, like I just said, were going to be me behind a catcher, and definitely keeping my distance. But one of the things I noticed, that of all the teams that I saw, all the kids, and these are all either preteens or another case they were 17 years old. We're talking about no mask at all. Okay, so none of these people have masks. None of the coaches have masks. None of the fans have masks. A lot of fans out there, and I'm telling you, not one single person had a mask. So outside of me, And at one other point, a partner of mine, we were the only people wearing masks. And I just found that, obviously quite crazy and irresponsible. And it got me to thinking, obviously, I think it seems like a whole lot of people out there think that wearing a mask is weak or what have you. And they just, I think because it's not hitting close to home to them, that they just feel like they could just be reckless. Uh, and obviously, the issue with the mask is not necessarily protecting myself only, but it's really to protect others because I don't know if I could have it and be asymptomatic. But these people just don't seem to care. And then, I thought about that these are, we're talking about parents and coaches, who are adults who are not leading an example at all for these kids to follow. And, I thought to myself, wow, if I was a kid, and let's keep it 100, these are all white kids, white coaches, and white fans so far. Okay. If I was a kid and I don't see my coach, I don't see my parents, nobody wearing masks, or taking any kind of precautions in terms of physical distance, then, why would I do that? As a matter of fact, I'd be inclined to feel that there's probably a lot of peer pressure that even if a kid wanted to wear a mask, he's probably afraid of being ridiculed or called weak. In this case, there's obviously a political backlash going to it. So, that's something I find, really disappointing that these, parents aren't leading in the direction that they should. Another friend of mine I saw, he runs an AAU program in Chicago, and he took his team to St. Louis, and St. Louis had a big old tournament and everything, and those kids are out there playing. Again, nobody's got on a mask. The kids are just swapping sweat, as they would normally do in a regular basketball game. And, we're talking about majority African American kids, a lot of us do have, pre-existing conditions. A lot of us, if we grew up in some lower income neighborhoods, sometimes, hey, we're more susceptible to things like asthma because, just the air is bad, sometimes the quality of health and whatnot, in our neighborhoods is bad just because of the poverty. Not that, all Black people are, in poverty situations. Of course, that's not what I'm saying. But a lot of us, are kind of put behind the eight ball that way. And again, I see Black men and coaches, who are not leading, in these areas. So maybe they slap on some hand sanitizer or something like that. But again, that's not, putting some young people in the midst of competition while these numbers are still going up. And most of our states right now, I just find, highly, highly irresponsible. And that brings me to college sports. So let's talk about college sports. Colleges, found themselves in a conundrum, because, most of their money, especially Division I, comes from NCAA football. And, how are they going to rectify that? So, I've seen some changes, again, I'm in Columbus, Ohio, and Ohio State's the big deal here. And I recall the athletic director, Gene Smith, saying a couple months ago, they were talking about spring practice and, how are they were going to be able to play these games in the shoe and whatnot. And, whether we were going to play without fans. And so one of the things that athletic director Smith said was, well, if it's not safe for the fans to be there, then why would it be safe for the players? Okay. So that made a lot of sense to me, makes a lot of sense. But then, that money talks. Money talks. And so now, not only are they're letting these kids back on campus, see, because they can't have football without the kids on campus. So now they're putting the kids back on campus. They're telling them you can go back out and work out. As a matter of fact, at Ohio State, they actually have to sign a waiver. Okay, they have to sign a waiver to, go out there to say that they're not going to hold the university responsible if they get COVID. Now, the school would tell you that it's a pledge, is what they call it, a pledge. But, if it's a pledge, then the first thing would be is who wrote it? Okay, did a college student write it? Did a professor write it? Did someone off the street write it? Or did an attorney write it? And then if a lawyer wrote it, then, you know, obviously that's going to be problematic. It's not just a pledge, it's saying, and they have to sign it on top of that. So now you got to sign something that says that you're not going to hold this school responsible if you get COVID. Okay, so that's like talking out of both sides of your neck. You can't say on one hand, it's safe to go out here and we're going to put you in this position, but then say, hey, if you get it, hey, it's not on us. You know, you already, I can understand if someone's in the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, because at the very least they're getting paid. They can decide to put their lives in their hands if that's how they want to do it. But if you're a so-called student athlete who's not getting paid, then to be able to put your life there out on the line for colleges, administrators, coaches, and whatnot to get paid, then, you know, that's, again, highly problematic. You got to understand that college football, well, let's just put it this way. ESPN paid $7.3 billion just to do the college playoffs, okay? And they were copping this past year a little over $1 million a year. I'm sorry, $1 million per ad. Okay, so it was a big payoff for them. Okay, so now you know, again, you're talking about $1 billion business. ESPN needs to have college football. Okay, and college football needs to have ESPN. So, but again, these kids aren't, you know, they're not being considered in that way. So, and just to illustrate it even further, okay, let's go to Oklahoma State. You got a coach there named Mike Gundy, who a couple months ago talking about getting his kids in practice, you know, and they were talking about, again, COVID and whatnot. And here's what he said, and I quote, they're 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22 years old, and they are healthy, and they have the ability to fight the virus off. He says it as if he's a doctor or something. But I'll continue. If that's true, then we sequester them and continue because we need to run money through the state of Oklahoma. Let me say that again. If it's true, then we need to sequester them and continue because we need to run money through the state of Oklahoma. Now, again, imagine that. I mean, they're telling you the game already. So these kids can get paid and all these coaches would be damned, you know, if a kid who's out there, you know, killing himself and another individual over, you know, a small piece of real estate known as, you know, yardage in a football game, they're not worth getting paid or anything, but they need to run money through the state of Oklahoma. So he understands too that it's a financial benefit for himself and for the state, even if it's not a financial benefit for the kids, and even if it pushes the kids, you know, even if it puts them in danger. So, you know, that's rather unfortunate. You know, I would hold parents accountable, you know, if they're going to put their kids in that situation, because, you know, a young person is not going to necessarily, you know how to make that decision. You know, they're going to feel that they're invincible. They're going to feel peer pressure. They're going to feel pressure from the coaches to be a part of that program. So, you know, with that said, you know, you got to understand that, you know, this is a different kind of time with this COVID, especially as it relates to African American players. Okay, so you know, they can't do this without us. They can't do this with the African American players, and they're already making some statements as it is. And because of the COVID, and because of the pressure that they want to get these kids back into these stadiums and stuff to generate this money, you know, with the death of George Floyd and all the protests going on, then hey, there is definitely a push where the athlete has some say. We're already seeing a place in Oklahoma State again, where there was a player who didn't appreciate that, again, this same coach, you know, had on a T-shirt that reflected a news program that's, you know, very right-wing, conservative, conspiracy theorist, trashes Black Lives Matter and everything. So he gets on there and he tweets that he wasn't going to work out, you know, and so this guy, you know, Gundy, does this fake apology, you know, and actually the kid ends up apologizing first and put it out on Twitter, but he goes out there fake, talking about how Black Lives Matter, and what he really meant to say was Black recruits matter. Because again, these are people who generally don't care about what these kids say. However, with all these companies and this tide being turned, it's not necessarily the same as it used to be. So those same people who were dogging out Colin Kaepernick, you're not going to get that. You're not getting that same feedback now. They're starting to back down. Okay. So, the young people now have to start to step up and understand that they got power in this. Their lives are invested, and they got people listening. Even if they just pretending to listen, they can make changes. You don't have to change anybody's heart to get change, but you do have to change laws. You do have to legislate. You do have to push this envelope forward. Okay. So, that's why I said I have to put those parents in charge, because, I have to understand somebody like Chuba Hubbard, who's the running back at Oklahoma State. I mean, he says, hey, I apologize. I should have put this on Twitter. I'm going to, stand with my team, and we're going to go forward, et cetera, et cetera. You got to understand, a coach like Mike Gundy, his whole life is sales. His whole life is selling a vision and a dream to parents and to young people. So he knows what to say to them. They don't really have the experience and the sophistication. Even if they're as brilliant as they may be, they don't have the experience and the sophistication to be able to, outmaneuver or understand a coach when he's just talking. Because again, the shirt is one thing, whatever with the shirt, but he's already said, has long been said plenty of things to let you know that he's not for Black Lives Matter. Okay. Dabo Swinney, the same thing. He, coach at Clemson, he had a shirt that says football matters. Okay. Football matters recently. And he called himself apologizing for that shirt. He also had an assistant coach who was telling the players, hey, you ghetto, I'm gonna send you back to the ghetto, and this, that, and the other. One of them actually called a player the N-word, okay? Or he was saying the N-word. And this was a few years ago, and Dabo Swinney didn't do anything about it. He handled it internally. And see, this is what guys like him says when it comes to race. And this is why, kids have to lead, or why parents have to lead, and get in step with the young people who are leading. This is what he said. This is regard to racism. When there are people, there's going to be hate. There's going to be racism and greed and jealousy and crime and so on, because we live in a sinful, fallen world. So that's what Dabo Swinney said about racism. We live in a fallen world. And see, that's the trick. That's the trick that Christians use, particularly white conservative Christians, okay, evangelicals. They use that sin, because if you say it's sin, then you don't have to deal with it. After all, you just pray about it, let God deal with it, right? But they're quick to say that you need to have law and order to have a society. They're quick to say that, hey, if you don't abide by my rules in this program, I can take your scholarship away. I can kick you off. Okay, Dabo Swinney has suspended a player a couple years ago because he got busted with some drugs, and then the kid was supposed to have, the 1 game suspension, was supposed to come back for the championship game, and Dabo says, no, you can't play that game. So where was the forgiveness? Where was the Christianity in that? He didn't have any, because he wanted total control. Total control. So again, now, he's not talking about, hey, we live in a fallen world, it's sin, so therefore, I'm going to put this kid back on the team. No, he says, you didn't follow the rules, so I'm going to be punitive against you. Okay? There's a reason why Nick Saban left the Miami Dolphins to coach the Alabama Crimson Tide. It's because he's a control guy, and you can't go in a 53-man, roster full of grown men who are getting paid and threaten them and call them all kind of names and try to humiliate them, because they're going to get back in your face. So that's why he needs to leave that program, So that's what we're talking about here. We can't let people like Dabo Swinney talk about sin and always say, well, I just lean back on my faith when it comes to racism, because again, that's a passive, non-movement type of mentality. It's sin. So therefore, it's something you should pray about. You got to let the Lord handle it. One day we shall overcome. But everything else, again, talking about law and order, hey, you own that. You all about that. Protesters shouldn't be tearing stuff up and all that. So again, you're continuously talking about out the sides of your, just talking out of two sides of your mouth, man. It's just really hypocritical. But again, young people got an opportunity to really get on this. Incidentally, Trevor Lawrence, who's the a white quarterback for Clemson, he was out on this thing way ahead of Dabo Swinney, and he said this. This is what he put on his Twitter account. I'm siding with my brothers that deal and continuously deal with things that I would never experience. The injustice is clear, and so is the hate. It can no longer be explained away. If you're still explaining it, check your heart and ask why. So now this kid is 20 years old. He's 20 years old, yet he's standing with his black teammates, when it concerning this issue. So again, that's what we're talking about. We really need for our parents, to step in. We need for the youth to go ahead and keep pushing forward. Understand that you do have power now. They want this money. It's up for you, man, to protect these kids, because these coaches, in a lot of ways, they're not going to protect these kids. So anyway, that's all we got for today. Hey, thanks for listening again. We try to keep it short this time. Hope you have a great Juneteenth, and you had a great Father's Day weekend. See you next time on the For Real Though show. Keep it real.